My name is Barak. I'm from the tribe of Naphtali, born near Kadesh. I'm not the kind of person you'd expect to lead an army. I wasn't a king. I didn't grow up in palaces or wear fancy robes. I was just a man trying to live his life in a time when life was anything but peaceful. Back then, Israel was in a dark place. For 20 long years, we had been suffering under the rule of King Jabin of Canaan. His capital was in Hazor, and his army was led by a man named Sisera. That name, Sisera, it made people's hands shake and voices drop to whispers. He commanded 900 iron chariots, 900. Just the sound of them rolling across the hills was enough to make villages scatter. No one could stand against him. We had no real army, no strong leaders. Everyone was afraid. We were always hiding, always praying the enemy would pass us by. I saw friends taken away, fields burned, families left with nothing. We cried out to God again and again, but year after year nothing changed, until one day everything did. I was home when it happened. The air was hot that day, thick with dust and silence. I was near Kadesh, the place I'd lived most of my life. I remember leaning against a stone wall, looking out at the hills, trying not to think too much about the world we were living in. And then someone called my name. It was Deborah. Everyone knew her. She was a prophetess, wise and fearless. People would travel miles just to hear her settle disputes. But she wasn't just a judge. She had a connection with God that most of us could only dream of. When she spoke, you listened, because it wasn't just her voice you were hearing. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Barak, the Lord God of Israel commands you, gather 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them to Mount Tabor." Just like that. No warm-up, no long speech, just a command, straight from the mouth of a prophet. My first reaction, confusion. My second, fear. I didn't say anything right away. I couldn't. The words sat heavy in my chest like stones. God wanted me to lead an army? Against Sisera? Against those iron chariots? That didn't make any sense. I wasn't a war hero. I wasn't born for glory. I wasn't even sure I could command a group of shepherds, let alone 10,000 men. My mouth went dry. I wanted to believe it was real, that maybe I could be brave, but I couldn't shake the fear. I looked at Deborah and said, "If you go with me, I'll go. But if you don't go, I won't go either." It wasn't just nerves. It was the truth. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed her faith beside me, her strength, her voice that could silence doubt. She didn't hesitate. She nodded and said, "I'll go with you. But understand this. The honor of this victory won't be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Her words hit me hard, but they were fair. I asked for her help, and this was the cost. I didn't argue. After that, everything moved fast. I sent out messengers to the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. We had no standing army, so we had to gather willing men, farmers, herders, craftsmen, men who had been living in fear for years but were ready, finally, to take a stand. They came, not all, but enough. Some brought bows, some brought nothing but knives and sticks. We didn't have armor or horses, but we had each other, and maybe, just maybe, we had God on our side. I remember the night before we left. The stars above Mount Tabor were sharp and clear. I walked through the camp, listening to the quiet breathing of men who were about to risk everything. Some were whispering prayers, others were staring into the fire, eyes wide open. No one was sleeping well, neither was I. My heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and purpose. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if we would win, but I knew we couldn't run anymore. We had been hiding for too long. This was our moment, and somehow I had to lead them into it. The ground trembled before we saw them. At first, it was just a low rumble, distant but heavy, like a storm crawling over the hills. Then the sound grew louder, stronger, until it was all we could hear. The clash of metal wheels, the snort of horses, the steady rhythm of iron crushing dirt. That's when we saw them, Sisera's army. 900 iron chariots, glinting in the morning sun like black teeth. They filled the valley below us like a flood of metal. I could feel the men behind me stiffen. Some started whispering, others gripped their weapons tighter. I couldn't blame them. None of us had ever faced something like this before. Those chariots weren't just weapons. They were terror made solid. Our swords couldn't pierce them. Our feet couldn't outrun them. My heart beat like a drum. I could hear it in my ears, louder than the thunder of hooves. Then everything changed. The sky, once clear, began to darken. Clouds rolled in fast, too fast, thick, heavy clouds, the color of ash. And then, like a curtain being torn open, the rain came. It wasn't a gentle shower. It was a downpour. Sheets of rain hammered the ground. In seconds, the dry earth turned to mud. Streams swelled. The Kishon River began to rise. I looked down and saw the chariots struggle. Their wheels sank. The horses slipped. Iron was never meant for mud. It was then I knew this wasn't chance. This was God. He had waited until the very moment we needed him, and then he moved. I turned to my men and shouted loud enough to rise above the storm. Now, this is the moment the Lord has given us. And I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran down the hill toward the enemy, through mud and rain and chaos. I could feel the water soaking my clothes, blurring my vision, but I kept going. I could hear the footsteps behind me, my men charging with me, roaring like lions finally uncaged. We crashed into Sisera's army with everything we had. The chariots were useless now. Some were stuck. Others had toppled over. Soldiers tried to run, but the mud grabbed at their feet. We were soaked, tired, outnumbered, but we had fire in our bones. Sword met sword. Cries filled the air, but we didn't stop. We pressed forward, step by step, through the storm. It wasn't easy. We lost some of our own. I remember faces, young ones, brave ones, but no time to mourn, not yet. We kept moving, because something had shifted. The fear that once sat like a rock in our chests was gone. In its place was something else, faith maybe, or fury, or both. Sisera saw it too. At some point he knew the battle was lost. I caught a glimpse of him in the distance, jumping from his chariot. He didn't look back. He didn't rally his men. He just ran, alone, through the storm, into the hills. We kept fighting until none of his army remained standing. Some drowned in the river. Others were struck down in the mud. The rest fled, dropping weapons as they ran. By the time the rain slowed, the field was quiet. Bodies lay scattered across the valley. The iron chariots, once so terrifying, now looked like broken toys, half buried in the dirt. I stood there, soaked to the bone, breathing hard. My sword hung at my side. My arms were shaking. But inside, there was peace. We had done it. Against all odds, we had stood our ground. I looked to the sky, where the clouds were beginning to break. A few rays of sun cut through, landing on the muddy battlefield like a promise. This wasn't just a victory, it was a miracle. As for Sisera, he was gone, somewhere out there, hiding. But that part of the story, well, someone else would finish it. For now, all I knew was this. We had faced the storm, and we were still standing. We didn't stop when the battle ended. As soon as Sisera ran, we gave chase, not out of revenge, but because we knew if we let any of them go, they'd come back. They always did. So we pressed on, across the soaked ground, over hills and through trees, until every last soldier in Sisera's army was gone. No chariots, no horses, no survivors. It was overwhelming. The same men who had once cowered in caves were now running with purpose, with power. But deep down, we all knew this wasn't something we did by our own strength. No amount of courage could have caused the skies to open. No sword of ours could have turned the earth into mud. We didn't win that day because we were strong. We won because God moved. The news about Sisera came later. I remember standing near a tree, wiping rain from my face, when a breathless messenger arrived. His clothes were torn, his feet muddy, but his eyes were wide with something close to disbelief. He said Sisera was dead. At first, we didn't understand. Then he told us the story. Sisera had fled north, exhausted and desperate, and come upon a tent in the hills. It belonged to Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. He must have thought he was safe there. After all, her family had ties with his king, so he asked for water, and she gave him milk. He asked for a place to rest, and she let him lie down. And then, when he had fallen asleep, she took a tent peg and a hammer and drove it straight through his temple. That was it. The mighty Sisera, commander of 900 iron chariots, brought down not by a soldier, not by a sword, but by a woman with a tent peg. The men around me went quiet for a moment. I think we were all trying to understand what this meant. The final blow didn't come on the battlefield. It came in silence, in a tent, by the hands of someone no one expected. I remembered what Deborah said to me before we marched. The honor will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Now I understood, and I didn't feel slighted. I didn't feel robbed. I felt awe, because only God writes endings like that. Only He could take a fleeing general and put him face to face with a woman no one would see as a threat, and use her as His final word. That's when the celebration began. As word spread through the land, people came out of their homes. You could hear singing from one village to the next. Families who had lived in fear for years danced in the streets. Children clapped their hands. Old men lifted their eyes to the sky, with tears running down their cheeks. No one praised me. No one praised Deborah alone. They praised the Lord, loudly, without shame. It was different from anything I'd ever seen. We didn't cheer for our own strength. We didn't shout about bravery. We sang about mercy. We sang about justice. We sang because the God who heard our cries had finally answered, and we couldn't keep quiet about it. I walked among the people and saw faces I hadn't seen smile in years. Farmers whose fields had been trampled were now raising their heads. Mothers who had once kept their children hidden were now letting them run free. The fear that had wrapped around our hearts like ropes was gone. That land, wet, torn, scarred, it didn't look like a battlefield anymore. It looked like a new beginning. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't dared feel in a long, long time. Hope. Not because all our problems were solved, not because we suddenly had power or riches or safety forever, but because I had seen what happens when God shows up. I had watched him fight for us, not because we earned it, but because we cried out, and he answered. I looked out across the hills, where the rain had washed the dust from every tree and stone. Israel was alive again. After the dust settled, after the weapons were put down, after the cries of battle faded into the wind, there was silence. Not the silence of fear, not the kind that settles in when people are afraid to speak. This was a gentle, grateful quiet, a quiet that came after deliverance, a quiet that felt like rest. That's when Deborah looked at me and said, "Let's sing." I didn't question her. I just nodded. Because what else could we do? After everything we had seen, after the storm, after the mud, after the hand of God reached into our world, we couldn't just go back to life as if nothing had happened. We had to say something. We had to thank him. But words weren't enough. So we sang. It wasn't a song for show. It wasn't meant to impress anyone. It came from deep inside us, from the part of the soul that still trembled from what it had witnessed. We sang to the one who had heard us. We sang to the one who had fought for us. Our song began with praise, praise to the God of Israel, who stirs hearts and moves mountains, praise to the Lord who rides on the clouds, who causes rain to fall and rivers to rise. We didn't write that song to glorify ourselves. We wrote it to lift up the one who deserved the glory. Then we sang about the people. Not everyone, no. Not every tribe showed up. But those who did, they were the ones who made victory possible. We named them in the song. The men from Zebulun who risked their lives on the battlefield. The warriors from Naphtali who stood strong even when the odds were against them. They didn't come for gold. They didn't come for power. They came because they heard the call and chose to answer. These were farmers and herdsmen, not soldiers. And yet, when the time came, they stepped forward. Their courage became the melody in our song. I remember the faces of some of them, young men with trembling hands who still stood tall, fathers who kissed their children goodbye and picked up old swords, men who had lost everything but still chose to fight for others. These were the heroes no one wrote scrolls about, but we remembered them. We also spoke of those who didn't come. It wasn't bitterness, it wasn't judgment. But the truth had to be said. In the song, we named the tribes that stayed behind. Reuben, who sat among the sheep pens, listening but not moving. Gilead, who remained beyond the Jordan. Dan, still with the ships. Asher, lingering by the sea. They didn't come. And though no curse was spoken, the silence around their names was loud. The song held it up like a mirror, not to shame, but to teach. Because courage isn't just about fighting, it's about showing up. And when your people cry out and you choose comfort over action, well, even silence becomes a choice. Still, the song ended not in judgment, but in joy, because despite who didn't show up, the Lord still delivered us, and that was worth singing about. As our voices echoed through the hills, something changed in the people. They began to sing with us. Not just the warriors, but the mothers, the children, the elders. The whole land began to hum with life again. That's when peace returned, not all at once, not like the turning of a page, but slowly, like morning light spreading across the fields. We laid down our weapons. We returned to our homes. Crops were planted again. Laughter returned to doorways. The roads felt safe to walk. And year after year, we lived in that peace. 40 years. 40 years without the sound of iron wheels. 40 years without hiding in caves. 40 years without fear in our throats. For the first time in a long time, I slept without my hand on the sword. I sat under the trees without watching the horizon. I saw children born who never knew the sound of war. And for that, I was grateful. Not proud, not powerful, just grateful. Because I knew the peace we lived in wasn't something we earned. It was a gift. When I look back, I still wonder why God chose me. My name is Gideon. I come from the tribe of Manasseh. It's not a big or famous tribe, and even in our small tribe, my family doesn't stand out. We're just ordinary folks trying to get by. I'm the youngest in the family, the one people often overlook. I never thought of myself as a leader or brave or anything like that. Life wasn't easy back then. In fact, it was pretty awful. We were living in fear almost every day. The Midianites had taken over our land. They'd come like swarms of locusts on camels with weapons and destroy everything. Every time our crops were ready to harvest, they'd swoop in and take it all. Wheat, barley, grapes, even the sheep and cows. They took everything. We worked so hard only to see it stolen or trampled. It was heartbreaking. We had to hide to survive. Some of us dug holes in the hills. Others lived in caves. Our voices stayed low, our movements quiet. I remember my mother whispering to us not to make too much noise when we played. We couldn't light fires at night. We couldn't sing. We couldn't live like normal people. We were afraid all the time. I'll never forget the day that changed everything. I was in a wine press, not to press grapes, but to thresh wheat. Normally, you'd do that out in the open, so the wind could blow away the chaff. But I couldn't risk it. If the Midianites saw me, they'd take it all. So I was down there, hidden, trying to keep quiet, beating the wheat with a stick, sweating and looking over my shoulder every few minutes. That's when he showed up. A man, no, not just a man, suddenly appeared and sat down under the big oak tree near where I was working. I froze. I didn't know who he was or what he wanted. He looked calm, peaceful even, like someone who didn't worry about soldiers or hunger. Then he looked straight at me and said something I still remember, word for word. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." I stared at him. Me? Mighty warrior? I thought he was talking to someone else. I looked around, but it was just me and him. I felt a strange mix of fear and confusion. Why would he say that to me? I couldn't help it. I spoke up. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? I asked. Where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us out of Egypt? But now he's abandoned us. He's handed us over to the Midianites. He didn't get mad. He just looked at me, firm and gentle, and said, Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Pardon me, Lord, I said, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family. He answered, I will be with you. You will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. That's when I started to feel something, just a little spark of hope, maybe, but also doubt. What if I was imagining this? What if he wasn't really who he said he was? So I asked him for a sign. Please wait here, I said. Don't leave until I come back with an offering. He nodded. I ran home as fast as I could. I took a young goat and some flour and made unleavened bread. I cooked the meat in a pot and poured the broth into a bowl. I wanted to give him something good, something respectful. My hands were shaking the whole time. When I got back, he was still there, sitting calmly under the tree like he'd never moved. I placed the meat and the bread on a rock and poured the broth over it. Then he did something I will never forget. He reached out his staff and touched the food with the tip. In an instant, fire came out of the rock. It wasn't just a spark. It was a flame that swallowed up everything, the meat, the bread, the broth. It all disappeared in the fire, and then he was gone, just like that, vanished. I stood there, staring at the rock, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew then, he wasn't just a man. He was an angel, a messenger from God, and I was terrified. Oh no, I whispered. I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face. I'm going to die. But then I heard a voice. I didn't see anyone, but I heard the words clearly. Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die. That voice, it calmed me. It wrapped around my fear like a warm blanket. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something new in my heart, a flicker of courage, a quiet kind of strength, not from me, but from the one who called me. Right there, beside that rock, I built an altar to the Lord. I called it, The Lord is Peace. Because in the middle of fear, I had found peace. And somehow I knew this was just the beginning. That night, God gave me a task, a hard one. He told me to tear down the altar to Baal, not just any altar. It was the one in my father's own backyard, the one the whole town used. Next to it stood a wooden pole, an image of Asherah. People worshipped there, bowed down, brought offerings, even my own family. But God said, tear it down. I was scared. These weren't strangers. They were my people, my neighbors, my uncles, my cousins. I knew how much they loved that altar, but I couldn't say no to God, not after what I'd seen. Still, I didn't want to do it in broad daylight. I didn't have that kind of courage yet. So I waited until it got dark. I chose 10 of my servants, men I trusted, men who would follow me without asking too many questions. We waited until everyone was asleep. The village quiet, only the wind and the crickets moving. Then we crept out, tools in hand. The altar was huge, made of stone. We started from the top, pulling it apart piece by piece. Every rock that fell made a noise that seemed way too loud in the night. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting someone to wake up and catch us. But we kept going. Once the altar was down, we cut down the Asherah pole. Then we built a new altar, this one for the Lord. We placed it on the same hilltop, using fresh stones. I brought a bull, just like God had asked, and we sacrificed it right there. When it was done, we hurried back home, silent and breathless. I lay in bed the rest of the night, heart pounding, waiting for the sun to rise. And when it did, chaos broke loose. The people saw the altar in pieces, the Asherah pole gone, and a new altar in its place. They were furious. Voices shouted through the village. Someone found the bull's remains. Then someone else said they'd seen me and my men moving around during the night. By mid-morning, they were at my door. "Bring out Gideon," they yelled. "He must die for what he's done. He tore down Baal's altar." I stood frozen, but then my father stepped forward. It surprised me. I thought he'd be angry. I thought he might even hand me over. But he looked at the crowd and said something I'll never forget. "Why are you defending Baal? If he's a god, let him defend himself. If someone destroys his altar, let Baal punish them." People looked at each other, unsure. Some muttered, but no one argued. Slowly, they backed away. That day, they started calling me Jerubbaal, which means let Baal contend with him. And Baal didn't. Nothing happened to me. I was still alive, still standing. But there was no time to relax. The Midianites were coming again. We got word that they had crossed the river and were camping in the valley of Jezreel. Amalekites and other eastern tribes had joined them, too many to count. Their camels covered the valley like a sea. My hands shook when I heard the news. The same fear crept back in. But something else stirred in me too. The Spirit of the Lord came upon me. I don't know how to describe it. It was like strength flowing into my bones, courage into my chest. I grabbed a trumpet and blew it with all my might. The sound echoed through the hills. Messengers ran to the other tribes: Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, Manasseh. I told them, "Come, join me. We will fight back." And they came. Men started arriving, bringing swords, shields, slings, young men, old men, farmers, shepherds, plus blacksmiths. My small hill became a campsite. Fires burned, armor clanged, people sang songs of courage, songs I hadn't heard in years. But deep inside, I was still afraid. What if this wasn't really from God? What if I got it all wrong? I needed to be sure, so I asked for a sign. I took a piece of wool, fresh, soft, and clean, and placed it on the ground outside. Then I prayed quietly, almost like a whisper. "Lord, if you really want to save Israel through me, just as you said, please do this. In the morning, let the wool be wet with dew, but the ground all around it dry." I went to bed with a tight chest. I barely slept. At dawn, I hurried outside. There it was. The wool was soaked. I wrung it out and water poured from it, a whole bowl full. But the ground around it, bone dry. It was exactly as I asked. And yet, I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe it was fear or doubt or just the weight of what was coming. But I asked again, "Please, Lord, don't be angry with me. Just one more time. Let me do the test again, but this time make the wool dry and the ground wet." Another night passed. I woke early, heart pounding again, and stepped outside. The ground sparkled with dew. My sandals left wet prints. But the wool? Dry. Completely dry. I stood there for a long time, holding the fleece in my hands. The morning sun warmed my face. I didn't hear any voices from heaven. I didn't see fire or angels. But I knew God had answered. This wasn't about signs anymore. It wasn't about who I was, or how small I felt, or what others thought of me. It was about Him, and He had chosen me. When I saw the crowd gathered around me, thousands of men from different tribes, ready to fight, I thought maybe, just maybe, we had a real chance. But then God said something that shook me. "You have too many men." Too many? That didn't make sense to me. We were going up against an army like a swarm of locusts, so big you couldn't count their camels. And now God wanted fewer men? "If you win with all these people," He said, "they'll think it was because of their own strength." So He told me what to do. "Tell the men, anyone who's afraid can go home." I took a deep breath and made the announcement. I watched as, one by one, men started walking away. Not just a few, thousands. By the time they were done, 22,000 had left. That left me with 10,000. It felt like a gut punch. But God wasn't finished. "There are still too many," He said. "Take them down to the water. I'll tell you who should stay." So I brought the men to a stream. God told me to watch how they drank. Some knelt down and put their faces straight into the water. Others scooped it up with their hands and lapped it like dogs, keeping their eyes up. God said, "Keep the ones who drink with their hands." I counted them, 300, 300 men, out of the original 32,000. That was all I had left. I looked at their faces, dirty, sunburned, tired, but alert. These were the ones God had chosen, and I had to believe that was enough. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay on the ground, staring at the stars, listening to the quiet breathing of the camp. The enemy was just down in the valley. So many of them. Fires glowing, shadows moving. I couldn't see the end of their tents. Fear started creeping in again. Then God spoke to me. "If you're afraid to attack, go down to the enemy camp with your servant Purah. Listen to what they're saying. That will give you courage." So I got up quietly, woke Purah, and we slipped through the dark, down toward the enemy lines. We stuck to the rocks, moved slow, barely making a sound. When we got close enough, we stopped near one of the tents. Inside, two soldiers were talking. "I had a dream," one of them said. "A round loaf of barley bread came rolling into our camp. It hit a tent and knocked it flat." The other soldier replied, "That must be the sword of Gideon, the Israelite. God has given Midian into his hands." I didn't move. I barely breathed. They knew. They didn't know when or how, but they knew what was coming, and they were afraid. Something in me shifted. That tight knot in my chest loosened. I turned to Pura and nodded. We crept back up the hill. When I returned to camp, I stood before the 300 and said, "Get up. The Lord has given the Midianite camp into our hands." I gave each man a trumpet, an empty jar, and a torch. No swords, no shields, just a strange set of tools. Then I split them into 3 groups and told them, "Watch me. When we surrounded the camp, do what I do. When I blow my trumpet, blow yours too, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." We moved out quietly, circling the valley, taking our positions in the night. The enemy was sleeping, unaware. Then, at just the right moment, I raised my trumpet and blew it as loud as I could. Crash! I smashed the jar in my other hand, and the torch lit up the night. Around the valley, my men did the same. 300 trumpets blasted, 300 jars shattered, 300 flames burst into the dark, and all of us shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The enemy camp exploded into chaos. Men woke up in panic, grabbing weapons, not knowing who was friend or foe. In the dark confusion, they started attacking each other. Camels screamed, tents collapsed, fires spread. The Midianite army, so big, so terrifying, fell apart in minutes. They ran. Some fled east, others south. The valley emptied in a storm of fear and confusion. We didn't chase them right away. I sent messengers to the tribes of Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, calling them to cut off the escape routes. I told the men of Ephraim to guard the river crossings. Soon, word came back. The enemy was being pushed into corners. 2 of their princes, Oreb and Zeb, had been captured and killed. The pursuit was working, but I wasn't done yet. I gathered my men and started chasing the rest of the army. We were tired. We hadn't eaten, but we kept going, across the Jordan River, through the hills. We tracked down the 2 Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna. When we finally caught them, they looked nothing like the proud leaders who once raided our land. They were silent, beaten, defeated. I brought them back. Israel had won. Not because we were strong, not because we were many, but because God was with us. 300 men, torches, jars, trumpets, and faith. That's what it took. After the battle, people looked at me differently, not like before. They saw me as a hero, someone who had brought them victory, safety, and hope. One day they came to me with a request. "Gideon, rule over us," they said. "You saved us from Midian. Be our king. And after you, let your son rule, and then your grandson after him." I looked at them and shook my head. "I won't rule over you," I said, "and my son won't either. The Lord is your king." I meant every word. I knew it was never about me. It was never my victory. God had done it all. I was just his servant. But even with that answer, I made a mistake, a big one. I said to the people, "Each of you give me a gold earring from the spoils you took." They agreed. They laid out the gold, earrings, ornaments, purple robes from the kings, even the chains from the camels. It was a huge pile. I took some of the gold and made something special, an ephod. It was like the kind priests wore to seek guidance from God, but this one was made of gold. I placed it in my hometown, on display. At first, maybe my intentions were good. I wanted people to remember the Lord's victory. I wanted them to honor him. But things didn't go the way I hoped. People started coming to see the ephod. They began treating it like a holy object. They bowed before it, prayed to it. They gave it their attention, more than they gave to the Lord himself. And I let it happen. I didn't mean for it to become a snare, but it did. The ephod became a trap, not just for the people, but for me and my household. And I carry that weight to this day. Still, God gave us peace. I stayed in my town and lived a quiet life. I had many children, 70 sons from many wives. The land was calm. The people worked in their fields. No enemy came to invade us. For 40 years, there was peace. Sometimes I would sit outside and watch the wheat sway in the wind, or listen to the laughter of my children, and I would whisper thanks to God. I knew I didn't deserve this peace, but I was grateful for it. I never built a palace. I never wore a crown. I lived and died as a farmer, just like I started. But peace doesn't last forever. Not long after I died, the people forgot. They forgot the Lord who rescued them. They forgot the miracles. They even forgot me. They went back to idols, back to Baal, back to the old ways. I'm not surprised. People are like that, quick to cry out when they're in trouble, quick to forget when life gets easy. But I still hope that someone, somewhere, remembers. Not me, but what God did. Not the ephod, not the trumpets, or the jars, or the dreams, but the truth behind it all. That the Lord is patient, that he sees even the weakest among us, that he gives peace, not just from war, but in the heart, and that sometimes he chooses the smallest person to do something big. When I was a boy, I didn't understand what it meant to be illegitimate. I just knew people looked at me differently. My mother wasn't like the other women in town. She didn't wear fine clothes or sit in the shade gossiping with neighbors. She worked the streets at night, and when the sun came up, she kept her head down. My father, Gilead, was a respected man. He had other sons, legitimate ones, with his wife, but he also had me, and though he didn't hide me, he didn't really protect me either. As I grew older, the stares turned into words, and the words turned into something sharper. My half-brothers couldn't stand me. "You're not one of us," they said. "You have no share in our father's inheritance. Your mother is a harlot." I remember the day they finally drove me out. I didn't fight them. What was the point? I had no claim, no ally, and no reason to stay in a house that never really felt like home. I walked away with nothing but my hands and a heart full of anger. I ended up in a place called Tub. It wasn't much, a rough land for rough people, but somehow I fit in. I wasn't the only one who'd been cast out, pushed aside, or forgotten. Others, bandits, wanderers, the broken, found their way there too. We were the rejected, the ones society didn't want. But together, we formed something different, something strong. They started following me, calling me leader. I never asked for it. I never claimed to be anything special. but I knew how to fight. I knew how to plan. I knew how to survive. Maybe they saw that, or maybe they just needed someone who'd been hurt like they had. Whatever the reason, they trusted me. And in that trust, I found a strange kind of family. Not the kind bound by blood, but by battle and loyalty. Years passed. I tried not to think about the people who'd cast me out. I had found my place, and that was enough. Or so I thought. Then the news came, whispers first, then loud cries. The Ammonites had declared war. They were marching through the land, taking cities, burning fields, and threatening everything in their path. The people of Israel were terrified. They didn't know what to do, and in their fear, they remembered someone, me. I still remember the day they showed up. A group of elders from Gilead came to Tob, dusty and nervous. When I saw their faces, I almost laughed. The same people who once let me be thrown out had now traveled all this way to beg for help. Jephthah, they said, we need you. Come lead our army against the Ammonites. I looked at them in silence. It felt like a bad joke. Didn't you hate me? Didn't you kick me out of my father's house? Now you want me back? They shifted on their feet, avoided my eyes. Yes, we did. But now we need you. Please, come with us. I could have refused. I wanted to. Part of me wanted to turn my back and let them see what it felt like. But something stronger held me. Not pride, not revenge. Something deeper. A sense that maybe, just maybe, this was what I was meant for. Still, I wasn't going to let them use me and toss me aside again. If I go with you, I said, and if the Lord gives me victory, will I truly be your leader? Will you make me head over all of Gilead? They looked at each other, then back at me. Yes, they said, the Lord is our witness. We will do as you say. I stood there, watching them. Their eyes were full of fear, but also hope. Maybe they had changed, or maybe they were just desperate. Either way, I knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I couldn't run from it. So I said yes, and with that, I turned back toward the land that once rejected me, this time not as a castaway, but as a leader. When I returned to Gilead, I wasn't sure what to expect. Some people watched me with cautious eyes, others with guilt, and a few with quiet hope. But I didn't come back for their approval. I came back because there was a job to do, and I intended to do it right. The first thing I did was gather the elders. I looked them straight in the eye and said, let's be clear. I didn't come here to be your tool. If the Lord gives me victory over the Ammonites, I will be your ruler, not just your general. They nodded solemnly. You will be head over all of us, they said. You'll lead Gilead. That wasn't enough for me. Words are easy to say and easier to forget. So I brought them to Mizpah, and there before the Lord we made a covenant. They swore publicly that I would be their leader if God gave us victory. I didn't take that lightly. I knew what it meant to make promises in front of the Almighty. With that settled, I began preparing for war. But before any swords were drawn, I wanted to try one last thing: peace. I sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites. I told them to ask a simple question: why are you attacking us? The king's reply was quick and sharp. Israel stole our land when they came out of Egypt. Now give it back peacefully. That wasn't true, so I sent messengers again, this time with history. When Israel came out of Egypt, my messengers said, they asked permission to pass through the lands of Edom and Moab, but were denied. They didn't fight those nations. They simply turned and traveled through the wilderness. Then they sent a message to Sihon, king of the Amorites, asking to pass through his land. Sihon refused and attacked Israel. So Israel fought back and won. That's how we got this land. It didn't belong to you. It belonged to Sihon. We took it in battle. And after that, we lived here for over 300 years. Why didn't you try to claim it back sooner? I told them to add this. It was the Lord, our God, who gave us this land. You worship Chemosh. Let him give you what he can. We worship the Lord, and he gave us victory. So no, we're not giving this land back. I hoped that might end it. But the king of Ammon didn't listen. He ignored everything, truth, history, even reason. So there was only one path left, war. And as I stood on the hilltop, looking over the land of Gilead, I felt it, like fire in my chest and wind at my back. The Spirit of the Lord came upon me. It wasn't like in anything I could describe. My doubts vanished. My steps grew firm. I felt strength that wasn't mine, clarity, purpose, courage. I gathered the men and marched across Gilead, from Mizpah toward the battle lines. As we moved, I looked at their faces, some young, some weathered, all of them waiting for me to lead. My heart beat heavy in my chest. And then, in the quiet moments before the clash, I did something that would change everything. I made a vow to the Lord. It wasn't something I planned. It rose from deep inside me, from a place of fear and faith mixed together. I said, Lord, if you will truly give the Ammonites into my hands, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to greet me when I return in peace shall be yours. I will offer it as a burnt offering. The words left my lips before I could fully grasp them. I just wanted God to see how serious I was, that I wasn't in this for glory or revenge. I needed his help. I couldn't do it without him. With the vow made, we marched forward, and the battle began. We won. The Lord gave us victory. The Ammonites fled before us, their armies scattered like dust in the wind. The people shouted, cried, fell to their knees. We had done what no one believed was possible. Gilead was safe. Israel was safe. I had led them to triumph. But as I turned toward home, something inside me grew heavy. I tried not to think about it. The vow, the words I had spoken. Maybe it wouldn't come to that. Maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be someone I loved. Maybe it would be a servant, or even an animal. But in my heart, I knew the truth long before I saw her. She came running out of the house, my only child, my daughter. She was dancing with a tambourine in her hands, her voice singing a song of joy. Her eyes sparkled. She wore white. Her hair blew in the wind. She was celebrating her father's victory, proud and unafraid. And in that moment, my heart shattered. I stopped walking. My knees nearly gave out. My sword fell from my hand. I tore my clothes and fell to the ground, crying out, "No! Oh God, no!" She stopped, confused, the tambourine slipping from her fingers. "Father," she said. I could barely speak. "You have brought me low," I told her, "and you are among those who trouble me." I opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot go back." She looked at me quietly, and then, slowly, her face changed, not with fear, not with anger, but with understanding. She knelt beside me and held my hand. "Father," she said, "if you have made a vow to the Lord, do to me according to what you have spoken, for the Lord has given you victory." I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to take it back, to erase the words I'd spoken in the heat of desperation. But vows made before God are not like other words. They are weighty, binding, final. She could see the pain in my eyes. She knew. "Only let me do this," she said. "Let me go up into the mountains for 2 months. Let me wander there with my friends and mourn, not because I'll never marry, but because I'll never live the life I dreamed of. Let me say goodbye." I nodded. It was the least I could give her. So she left, climbing the hills with her friends, laughter and sorrow woven into their voices. I watched her disappear into the trees, her white robe fluttering in the wind. For 2 months she was gone. I waited. I prayed. I begged for a sign, for another way, for some escape, but none came. When she returned, her eyes were clear. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She simply walked up to me and said, "I'm ready." I don't remember the ceremony. I don't remember the words I said, or how many times I stumbled, or whether the people around me wept. I just remember her eyes, steady, kind, filled with something stronger than I had ever seen in a soldier. And then she was gone, my daughter, my only child, given to the Lord because of a vow I made in a moment of fear and faith. From that day on, the daughters of Israel began a tradition. Each year, for 4 days, they would go out and remember her. They would tell her story. They would sing for her, not because she was a victim, but because she was brave, because she kept her word, because she believed in something greater than herself. And so did I. For 6 years, I served as a judge over Israel. No longer just a fighter, I became something else, someone who settled disputes, made decisions, led people not with the sword but with wisdom. At least I tried to. People came from far and wide with their troubles, land arguments, broken vows, stolen livestock, family quarrels. And I listened. I sat under the open sky or at the city gate, and I listened. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I missed the clarity of battle. In war, you know who the enemy is. In peace, it's not always that simple, but I judged fairly. I remembered what it felt like to be cast out, ignored, so betrayed. So I never turned away the lowly, never laughed at the poor, never sided with the powerful just because they had more to give. I tried to be the kind of leader I had once needed. Yet no matter what victory I achieved, no matter how many wrongs I helped make right, a shadow followed me. It moved beside me silently. It had my daughter's smile, her laugh, her final words. I never spoke of her again, but not a day passed without her name in my heart. People respected me. They called me Judge Jephthah. They brought me their children for blessing. They toasted me at their weddings. But none of it could lift the weight I carried. And then came the men of Ephraim. They were angry, furious. They came in force, not to thank us for the victory against Ammon, but to accuse us. They stood at our gates shouting, "Why didn't you call us to fight? You went to war without us, and now you want the glory all to yourself." I tried to speak calmly. I did call for help. I told them, but you didn't come. You ignored us. So we went without you, and the Lord gave us victory. But they wouldn't listen. Their pride was louder than reason. They threatened to burn down my house, with me in it. So the fighting started again. This time it wasn't against outsiders. It was brother against brother. The men of Gilead took up arms, and we pushed the Ephraimites back. We fought them at the fords of the Jordan River. We set guards there, and whenever a man tried to cross, we asked him to say one word, Shibboleth. It sounds simple, doesn't it? A word? But Ephraimites couldn't pronounce it right. They would say Sibboleth. That was enough. We knew who was friend and who was enemy. It was brutal, bloody, and in the end, 42,000 of our own brothers lay dead. We won, yes, but I don't know if you can really call it a victory when it leaves your heart more wounded than your body. After that, the land grew quiet. People returned to their homes. The disputes became smaller again, missing goats, broken fences, injured pride. I kept judging, kept listening, kept doing what I could. But I was tired. Age had started to catch me. My hands didn't grip the sword like they used to. My back ached when I sat too long, and my eyes, once sharp, now blurred at the edges. Still, I served, until the day I could no longer rise. They say I died in peace. Maybe they're right. I closed my eyes in my own land, in Gilead, the place that once rejected me, then called me back, the place where I won battles and lost more than I ever expected. They buried me in one of the towns of Gilead, not with grand processions or golden tombs, but with quiet respect. Some wept, others simply bowed their heads. I had been a leader, a judge, a warrior, and a father. My life held honor, sorrow, triumph, and a vow I could never take back. That was the cost of leading, and I paid it all. I wasn't even born yet when everything about my life got decided. My story started long before I took my first breath, when my mother was out in the fields alone. She had been childless for years, always praying for a baby. Then one quiet afternoon, something unbelievable happened. A man appeared, tall, glowing, different from anyone she'd ever seen. He didn't walk up from the road. He just showed up. She later said his eyes seemed to look right into her soul, full of fire but peaceful at the same time. He said, "You are going to have a son." Just like that. But this son, me, wasn't going to be just any child. He gave my mother strict instructions. She wasn't allowed to drink wine or eat anything unclean while pregnant. And after I was born, no razor was ever to touch my head, ever, because I was to be set apart from birth, a Nazirite, dedicated to God. He said I would begin to rescue Israel from our enemies, the Philistines. My mom was shaking when she got home. She told my father everything, and he didn't know what to think. So he prayed, asking God to send the man back, and he did. The angel came again, and this time my father saw him too. After they realized who he was, an angel from the Lord, they fell on their faces. So before I even opened my eyes, before I cried for the first time, my life already had a path. I was chosen. I grew up under watchful eyes. My parents didn't just love me, they were careful. always reminding me that I was different. "You're not like the other boys," they would say. "God has a purpose for you. Don't forget that." I didn't get to do some of the things my friends did. No sweet wine, no parties, no running off into the hills without telling someone. And most of all, they never let anyone near my hair. I hated the constant combing, the knots, the way it fell in my eyes, but they never gave in. When I was little, I didn't think much about it. I was just happy climbing trees and chasing goats. But as I got older, I started noticing things, like how my strength didn't feel normal. One time, a tree branch broke beneath my feet. I fell hard, landing on a rock. The other boys gasped. I stood up without a scratch. Another time, two of them tried to wrestle me down. I threw them both off me without even meaning to. My arms didn't look huge. I wasn't a giant. But something inside me burned, something I couldn't explain. It scared me sometimes, because I didn't ask for it. I didn't train for it. It was just there. I asked my father once, "Why did God make me this way?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Because he has something big for you to do." That's all he said, but it didn't make things easier. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to play without someone whispering, "There goes that special boy." I wanted to cut my hair. I wanted to run wild, but I couldn't. And then came the dreams. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, images in my head of battles I didn't understand, of enemies falling, of fire and shouting. Sometimes I'd wake up with my fists clenched tight, nails digging into my palms. I'd sit in the dark and wonder, is this what it means to be chosen? I tried to hide it, but God didn't let me. One day I was walking along the fields, alone. I wasn't looking for anything, just thinking, trying to clear my head. Then, out of nowhere, I felt something, a stirring, like lightning in my chest. My steps quickened, my arms tingled. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stop moving. It was like someone else was guiding my feet. That was the first time I knew, really knew, that God's Spirit had come upon me. It didn't hurt, it wasn't loud, but it changed me. Just for a moment, I felt more alive than I ever had before, like I could do anything. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? Who would believe me? But from then on, it happened more often, in quiet moments, when I was alone, sometimes when I was angry, or when someone was in danger. It wasn't constant. It came and went, like wind. I didn't control it. I just knew when it came, I had to act. That's how I grew up. A boy marked from birth. A boy with rules I didn't choose. A boy with strength I didn't understand. And a fire in my chest that kept coming back. People looked at me and saw a strong young man. But inside, I was just a kid trying to figure out why God had picked me and what exactly He wanted me to do. It was a hot day when I first saw her. We were heading down to Timnah, and I didn't tell my parents why I wanted to go. Not at first. But the truth? The moment I saw her, I knew. She wasn't like any girl I'd met before. Something about the way she moved, the way she looked over her shoulder. I couldn't stop staring. I didn't know her name, didn't know her voice, but something in me said, "That's her." Not "I want to talk to her," not "she seems nice." No, I wanted to marry her. She was a Philistine, and I knew what that meant. We weren't supposed to mix with them, but I didn't care. It felt bigger than rules, like my heart had already made the choice before my mind could argue. I told my parents, "Get her for me. She's the one I want." They looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Is there no woman among your own people?" my father asked. "Among your relatives, your tribe?" I just shook my head. "She's the one." They didn't understand. How could they? To them, it was foolish, risky, even offensive. But to me, it felt like destiny. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't just about beauty. It was like something had been lit inside me the moment I saw her. I knew they were angry, maybe even ashamed. But I didn't budge. So we went back to Timnah again, this time to talk with her family. I was walking a little ahead of everyone, thinking about what I'd say when I saw her again, wondering if she'd smile. That's when the lion came. I heard it before I saw it. A low growl, a sudden rustle in the vines, and then there it was, leaping out of the brush, mouth open, teeth flashing. It was close, too close. I froze for half a heartbeat. And then something came over me. Not fear, not panic, power. It rose up in me like fire, like wind, like nothing I could describe. I don't remember thinking. I just moved. My hands went out and grabbed the lion. My fingers sank into its fur, its flesh, and with one sudden twist, I tore it apart, just like that, like it was nothing, like I'd done it 100 times. Then it was quiet again. I stood there, panting, looking at the lion's body on the ground. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was something else, a rush, a storm inside me, and I knew God's Spirit had come upon me again. When my parents caught up, I said nothing. I didn't tell them about the lion. I don't know why. Maybe because it didn't feel like something I could explain. Maybe because I wasn't sure it had even happened. Time passed. We arranged the marriage. I visited her again, and the more I saw her, the more I was convinced. She was the one. Later, when we went back for the wedding, I walked the same path. I passed by the spot where the lion had died. I stopped. And there, inside the carcass, bees. A whole swarm had built a hive in the skeleton, and honey, thick golden honey dripping from the ribs. I reached in and scooped some out. It was sweet, strange but sweet. I brought some to my parents and gave them some too. Still didn't say a word about the lion. At the wedding feast, things got noisy. Philistines know how to throw a party. Music, food, laughter. They assigned me 30 companions, men from their own people. They weren't really my friends, more like watchers. But I smiled and drank and tried to fit in. Then I had an idea. "Let me tell you a riddle," I said. "If you can solve it in 7 days, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't, you give me the same." They liked the challenge, so I gave them the riddle. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. They laughed, thinking it'd be easy. But 3 days passed. Nothing. They couldn't figure it out. On the 4th day, they changed tactics. They went to my bride and said, "Trick him, get the answer, or we'll burn you and your father's house." She cried. She begged. Every time I looked at her, her eyes were wet. "You don't love me," she whispered. "You won't even tell me the answer to your own riddle." She wore me down. I gave in. I told her. And the next day, just before the deadline, the men came to me with smiles. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? I stared at them, my fists clenched. They knew. They couldn't have figured it out on their own. I looked at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, I said through my teeth, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Something inside me burned, not from the loss, not even from the betrayal, but from the way they laughed as they walked away. I should have walked away. I should have just let it go, told myself it wasn't worth it, but I couldn't. They tricked me, lied to me, humiliated me, and the worst part, I saw it coming and still let it happen. I left the wedding in anger. I didn't even finish the feast. I was done, with her, with all of them. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked. Days passed. I cooled off a little, thought maybe I could go back and make things right. I brought a gift, a young goat, figured that was enough. But when I got there, her father stood in the doorway, blocking me. She's not yours anymore, he said. I gave her to your companion. I thought you hated her. My chest went cold. My fists clenched. You what? He laughed nervously. Her younger sister's prettier. You can have her instead. That was it. They had cheated me, taken my wife, laughed in my face, acted like it was nothing. I walked away without a word, but inside I was shaking. Not from sadness. This time it was pure fury. I didn't yell, didn't punch anyone, not yet. I had something better in mind. I caught 300 foxes. It took time, patience, but I did it. I tied them tail to tail, 2 by 2, and between each pair, I tied a torch. Then I lit the torches and let them loose in their fields. It was harvest time. The flames raced through their grain, their vineyards, their olive trees. Everything went up in smoke. You should have heard the screaming. That wasn't enough. I found a few of them along the road, men who had laughed at me during the wedding. I beat them until they couldn't move. I didn't kill them. I wanted them to remember. But the Philistines didn't take it lying down. They found my former wife and her father, and they burned them, just like that. The people I once cared about turned into ash. That made me even angrier. I struck again, harder this time. No torches, no foxes, just fists. I went after the men who started it all and hit them with everything I had. Bones cracked, blood spilled. I didn't stop until every one of them was down. After that, I went and hid in a cave in the rock of Etam. I thought I'd get some rest, but I was wrong. The Philistines marched into Judah looking for me, and guess what? My own people gave me up. 3,000 men of Judah came to me, not to protect me, not to hide me, but to bind me and hand me over. You know the Philistines rule over us, they said. What have you done? I laughed. I only did to them what they did to me. But they were scared, desperate. We're not here to kill you, they promised, just to tie you up and take you in. I sighed. Fine, swear to me you won't kill me yourselves. They nodded. We won't. So they tied me up with 2 new ropes, tight, strong, fresh. I didn't fight it, let them do their thing. They led me down from the rock and handed me over. The Philistines saw me coming and shouted for joy, like I was a prize, a trophy. But then the Spirit of the Lord rushed over me again. The ropes snapped like burned thread, just fell off. My arms were free, and my strength returned hotter than ever. I looked around. No sword, no weapon. Then I saw it, a donkey's jawbone lying in the dirt. I picked it up, and I attacked. They came at me with swords, spears, shields. I didn't stop. I didn't count. I just moved. One after another, they fell. The jawbone cracked skulls, broke ribs, tore through armor. Blood flew, dust rose. They screamed, they ran. I chased. By the time it was over, 1,000 men were lying on the ground. 1,000. I stood there breathing hard, covered in sweat and dirt and blood, the jawbone still in my hand. I raised it and said, "With a donkey's jawbone, I've made donkeys out of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I've killed 1,000 men." Then I dropped it. But once the rush faded, I felt something else. Thirst. Deep, burning thirst. My throat was dry as sand. My lips cracked. My knees buckled. I collapsed to the ground. I thought I was going to die. After everything, after the wedding, the fire, the fight, I was going to die of thirst in the dirt. I looked up and cried out, "God, you gave me this great victory, and now I'm going to die of thirst, fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Silence. Then, out of the rock, water. It burst out suddenly, cold, clear, life-saving water. I crawled to it, drank deeply, and felt strength return to my body. That place is still called En Hakore, the spring of the caller, because that's where God heard me and saved me. I knew who she was. I knew she wasn't from my people. I knew the danger. I knew the risk. But I didn't care. Her name was Delilah. She had a voice like honey and eyes that could pull a man's soul right out of his chest. The first time I saw her, something inside me slipped. I told myself it was nothing, a little fun, a distraction. But I was lying to myself. I loved her. Not the way I loved others before. This was different, deeper, or maybe just darker. When I was with her, I didn't think about who I was supposed to be. I didn't think about God or strength or calling. I just wanted to be near her. She made me feel seen, or maybe she just made me feel needed. At first, it was perfect. Laughing, talking, lying together under the shade. She'd run her fingers through my long hair and whisper things that made my heart race. I told her stories, left out the parts I couldn't explain. But then she started asking questions. "Samson," she said one night, tracing a finger along my arm, "tell me the secret of your strength. How could anyone tie you up and make you helpless?" I laughed, thought she was joking. "If someone tied me with 7 fresh bowstrings," I said, "ones that haven't dried out, I'd be as weak as any other man." I fell asleep. I woke up to shouting, "Samson, the Philistines are here." I jumped up, ripped the bowstrings like they were threads, and scattered the attackers like leaves in the wind. She stood there, arms crossed. "You lied to me," she said. "You don't love me." I smiled, tried to play it off, but something in her eyes had changed. She asked again. "If you really loved me," she whispered, "you'd tell me the truth." The next time, I told her, if I'm tied with new ropes, ropes never used before, I'll be powerless. Same thing. She tied me while I slept, woke me with the same scream. I broke the ropes like they were nothing. Again she pouted. Again she said, "You're just making fun of me." Part of me knew what she was doing. Part of me didn't care. The third time I told her, "Weave my 7 braids into the loom, tighten it with a pin, and I'll be helpless." She did it. I woke up and tore the whole loom from the floor. She started crying, real tears, or at least they looked real. "How can you say you love me when your heart's not with me?" she said. "You've mocked me 3 times now. You haven't told me the truth." And she didn't stop. Day after day she asked, begged, pushed, wore me down. I couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe. Her words were always there. Finally, I broke. I told her everything. "No razor has ever touched my head," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I've been set apart for God since birth. If my head is shaved, my strength will leave me. I'll be like any other man." She didn't say much after that, just smiled, kissed me, said she loved me. That night, I slept like a man with no worries. She let a man into the room while I was out cold. He shaved my head, 1 lock at a time, and when the last braid fell, so did everything else. She whispered, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." I jumped up, ready to fight like always. But nothing happened. No power, no fire in my chest, no spirit. I swung my arms and felt only weakness. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. They tackled me easily, laughed, hit me, tied me, and I couldn't stop them. They dragged me away like a beast, took me to Gaza, mocked me in front of crowds. Then they brought out the knives, and they took my eyes. The pain was sharp, but the shame burned hotter. I used to see far. I used to see enemies coming. I used to look at the world and know I had a purpose. Now everything was dark. They put me in chains, made me grind grain in the prison like an animal. Day after day, step after step, eyes gone, dignity gone, and all I could do was remember how I gave everything away for love that wasn't real, how I traded strength for a kiss, how I thought I was invincible, and I wasn't. I used to think I was unstoppable, that strength alone could carry me through anything. But now, in this cold, damp prison, I sit in darkness, truly blind for the first time, and not just because my eyes are gone. When they gouged them out, I didn't scream. I didn't even fight. What was there to fight for? My pride was already crushed, my power gone, my heart broken by my own foolishness. I had loved a woman I shouldn't have trusted. I gave away the secret of my strength like it was nothing, and in that moment of weakness, she sold me out, just like that. My head was shaved, my vow broken, and the Spirit of the Lord left me. I felt it the second it happened, like the sun going behind a cloud, never to return. They chained me like an ox and led me through the streets of Gaza, laughing and spitting at me. "This is the mighty Samson," they jeered. "This is the man who tore down our gates and crushed our armies." Now I grind grain in the prison like a slave. My hands know the shape of the millstone better than they ever knew a sword. My muscles ache, my scars itch, and my soul stays quiet. But somewhere deep down, a flicker of something stirs. Repentance, maybe. Regret, definitely. I think a lot in this darkness about my parents who believed God had a plan for me, about the angel who promised I would deliver Israel, about the strength I had and how I wasted it. I thought I was strong enough to do it my way. I wasn't. But there's one thing they didn't realize. My hair started to grow again. It didn't happen all at once. At first, just a bit of fuzz, like the memory of something lost. But every day I felt it, those strands creeping back over my scalp like grass after a fire. They didn't know. They thought I was broken, finished. They were wrong. One day they came for me. It was some big celebration in the temple of Dagon. The rulers, the generals, even the people, thousands of them gathered to make fun of me. "Bring out Samson," they shouted. "Let him entertain us." They led me by the hand like a child into the middle of the temple. I could hear them cheering, laughing, mocking me. Someone even threw a piece of bread at me. It hit my shoulder and rolled to the floor. I smiled. They thought they'd won. They thought I was helpless. But in my heart, I whispered a prayer. Not a loud one, not like before, just a quiet, trembling prayer, like a man who knows he doesn't deserve to be heard. "Lord God, please remember me." I stood between two pillars. I asked the servant boy to guide my hands, just to feel them. He thought I was tired. He didn't know I was counting the stones, feeling the cracks, measuring the weight with my fingertips. Then I prayed again. "Please, God, give me strength just once more. Let me pay back the Philistines for what they did to me. Not for my name, but for yours." I placed my right hand on one pillar, my left on the other. I could feel the temple groaning, full of people. I could hear their laughter above me, unaware of what was coming. Then I pushed. It didn't feel like before. My body wasn't the same. I was weaker, slower. But the strength didn't come from me this time. It came from somewhere higher, somewhere deeper. The pillars shook. The roof split. Screams filled the air, followed by the roar of falling stone. And then, silence. Everything went black again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I knew the cost. I knew I wouldn't walk out of that place alive. But in that final moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. They say I killed more of our enemies in that one moment than I had in my entire life. I don't know if that makes me a hero. I don't know if that makes up for everything I did wrong. But I know this. God heard me, and that's enough.